You can just announce the meeting and the topic.
Good evening. We're going to start our Economic Revitalization Committee meeting. The meeting is being recorded. Just so you know, it is being recorded. Right. The topic tonight that we're going to discuss is possible redistricting. Board members within Daniel Boone School District. Our solicitor is here, so if there are any questions, he can start to answer it. I don't think we're going to come up with a solution tonight. To give some background information, really rough background information, there are 9 board members at Daniel Boone School District. There are 3 different municipalities. They come from 3 from each, Amity, Union, and Birdsboro, under the present terms of what it is, the way it's set up now. It's been brought to our attention that some taxpayers feel that, again, there's an inequity of the number of board members per representative based on population, based on revenue that's generated from each of the 3 municipalities. So our solicitor has kind of given us a guideline that maybe we should come up with a game plan to come up with a solution to make it more equitable and more fair among taxpayers in the district. So we're having this meeting to basically get ideas. We probably will not have, obviously, a final resolution or a solution to take to the rest of the board. This will probably happen if we make any changes. It will happen next election. Correct, right, Mr. Zubers? It could possibly happen.
It could be deferred to
the next election.
Well, I mean, you can even stagger it out depending on.
The next board seats that are available will be in
2014.
Right, so those seats would be affected by it for sure.
Now, Mr. McCullough, just so that we set the table properly, and if I remember reading Mr. Subers.
Sure.
As we are currently situated, are we constitutionally?
You're subject to a challenge that the board election regions are not as nearly equal in population as practical, which is a requirement under the
one person, one vote.
Yeah, under the one person, one vote idea, which derives from the Equal Protection Clause of the United States Constitution, which is made applicable to the states and to school districts under the 14th Amendment. There's also a requirement in the Pennsylvania Constitution and the school code. They're all basically the same requirement, that where you have elections by region, that those regions have to be as nearly equal as practical. And they also have to be based
in terms of population.
In terms of population, and they also have to be based on existing election precincts. Right.
Correct. Now, as we constituted the districts back in, 53 or whenever the district...
66.
66, that probably was the case. It was probably about as close as it could be back then.
Correct.
So we started off...
Correct.
And at each census thereafter, we have to assume they did not change the boundaries much, if at all. So since 66, these districts have probably been pretty close to being put in place and haven't changed much.
Correct.
Correct. So currently now, the population is, Amity's roughly, after 2010 census, is 12,500, I believe. Birdsboro is like 5,100, and Union's 3,500.
Correct.
We don't have that data broken out by election.
We don't have
as per your request.
Well, and that's the issue, I think, because you have 2 constraints. One is whatever your region is, and you can define it any way you want. The region has to be all regions have to be as uniform as possible in terms of population, but the other constraint is the boundaries of those regions have to reflect the existing election precincts.
Right.
So you're going to be combining precincts to get to certain population levels. And without knowing what the population levels are within the precincts, I don't know how you do that.
Unless, and then Brian was correct, unless we go 9 at large.
There's actually 3 options. You can go at large, which is every taxpayer of the district votes for the entire board.
Which Governor Mifflin does that, I believe. And Wilson does that.
The second option is regional, where you can have from 3 to 9 regions, up to 9. Each region has to have the same number of directors who would be elected
from their region
and must reside in their region.
But each region has to be Population equal, right?
as nearly as practical.
Which would be a redistricting.
And then the third option is a combination at large and regional, in which case you would have between, I think it's 3 or 6 directors at large.
You'd still have to redistrict in that case also.
Yes.
So we got one where we don't redistrict and 2 that we'd have to redistrict.
Right, and any of these plans would have to be court approved.
Okay, now I have a question. Because every 10 years there's a U.S. Census. Would that possibly mean we'd have to change those districts every 10 years?
If the population changed drastically enough
Okay,
to make it.
but drastically as an open...
Yeah, it's not, there's no hard and
Like 10
fast
style, like-
rules. The small, like, school districts aren't subject to the same rules as the United States congressional district because it's smaller in size and it's harder to divide that up in, and make it equal, exactly equal.
So in other words,
You have more leeway.
so theoretically...
Particularly when you have the constraint of
So
staying within the
theoretically,
electrical precincts, which we
right.
don't have control over those
Correct.
boundaries.
Correct.
so theoretically, it could go 20, 30 years if there's no major increase in population in one district. So again, I'm just looking at all ideas. That's why I said so that might not be an every 10-year situation, but it also could be an every 10-year
Well, it's got to be
situation.
examined every 10 years. I mean,
Correct, but
it
again,
shouldn't
if
be
it's not significant, then
Right.
then again we have to find out what's
Right,
significant.
right now, our election precincts and our districts coincide with one another, correct?
Yes,
Yes, okay.
correct.
So if we were to redistrict, and I'm just using fictitious numbers, Birdsboro 2 could pick up part of Amity, whatever.
Well, the way the redistricting maps are, I mean, do they have to be continuous borders?
They're supposed to be contiguous.
Contiguous, that's what I meant.
So they'd have to connect. And
So Birdsboro 1 and 2 would have to connect with Amity 1, for instance.
Right.
Right,
Or with Union.
right. There is a point where all 3 municipalities
This is
touch.
almost like redistricting
Right.
for students.
Like there.
Right.
That
Same
point.
So you
concept.
can kind of play with that point and argue that that's contiguous.
Yeah, but they don't all have to be contiguous. I mean, you could go down 422 and pull some of that Amity into Birdsboro, and you can stay on this side of the.
You guys stay within the electric precincts. So if you pull up the maps, if you pull, for example, number 4, Amity number 4, into, let's say, Union, you can't just pull, between Schuylkill River and 422. You got to pull the whole district down into Union Township. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty
Well, no,
familiar
the
with it.
districts don't have to be the same as the election precincts.
Yeah, they have to follow the electric precincts.
No, that was part of what we talked
No,
about.
you have to use.
Contiguous
You
boundaries.
can't divide the election district,
The precinct.
the precinct. You can't divide that because that's how they track the votes. Basically, that's why that's required.
So we can't split like
It's like
right
a
now.
jigsaw puzzle.
So
you
Birdsboro's
couldn't
two.
take where Monocacy, over the Monocacy Firehouse and pull that into Union Township. So everybody that votes there would be voting for a school board member.
Unless that's one precinct. If that's
That is
not.
one precinct. That voting district is one. That
No,
Monocacy.
I mean, that's not according to this map. It's not.
So no, I'm sorry. So you can't take like Birdsboro has 2. You can't take half of Birdsboro, whatever 2 closest to Union, and move that over.
You can
have to take
move-
all of that number 2 over, but you can't
Yes.
move part of it. So in other words, we have to figure out the 9 there are 9 existing.
10.
10. We'd have to figure out, shuffle those 10 around to come up with an even split, but they have to be, contiguous?
Yes.
So that's basically what you're trying to do. You're trying to figure out how to reshuffle those 10, keeping them side by side and coming up with equal populations.
Right. So, I mean, before you can even do that, you need to know what the population
Correct.
numbers are for each jigsaw puzzle piece.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then you're going to put the puzzle pieces together in such a manner that you get to roughly the same
Now-
population in each.
Correct. I got you. Okay.
You know
No, wait,
what?
I'm sorry.
I don't really understand how you. I mean,
How
unless
do they
you're
know-
gonna take like Amity 2 and split it in half.
But how does
But we don't know what the population is.
How
in
I
Amity
understand
too.
that, but if you can't split the precincts or the the election precincts, maybe.
you're going to move, what you would ultimately need to do is move part of Amity over to Union and, like, for instance, Amity 1 touches
Birdsboro.
So
Right.
you could move Amity 1 over to Birdsboro. I don't know
Right.
if that, where
So-
that
but my
and you can
concern,
move
though-
Amity 3 or,
My
You can
concern
move
is-
Amity 3, 4, and 5 into
Let's say
Union
that
if you had
Amity 1,
to.
by moving Amity 1 into Birdsboro,
Mm-hmm.
you could have made that voting precinct larger than any one of the others
Possibly, that's
Yeah.
what, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know how much
until we have the
population
population.
I mean, I was hoping that we'd be able to take Amity 1 and say, okay, everybody that's west of Russell votes.
No, you can't
You
do
can't
that.
do that.
Now, I have a question. Is there any way the census breaks it out by voting? Is that do they actually
They don't
come up
break
with
it out by
So how are we ever going to determine that?
I did a little Googling today in anticipation of that question, and the census does not,
So how are we ever going to
they don't
determine that?
micro it down to Amity 1. I mean, we'd have to. that's
Yeah,
gonna
like in
take a lot
Birdsboro,
of-
there are two.
You can get it. It's going to take legwork. It's not
Correct.
going to be by the census.
Yeah,
And are
it's
they-
not like the Board of Elections have.
They have
it
voter
by
registration.
They have voter registration, but not populace.
They don't
So how
have
are you
head
gonna do it?
counts.
They do have it by where you vote.
Yeah, but that doesn't. So
It's only registered
that's only
voters.
registered voters. So like in
total
Birdsboro.
population.
Okay, the only reason why I use Birdsboro because I'm
But a census is done by going door to door to take the population.
Or an email.
So you can do that. I mean, I was actually last night in the process of pulling down the Pennsylvania census data, but it was such a large file, I walked away from it. But I mean, until you get into it, you have to open up the census data, and you should be able to get into it by county, by municipality, and by voting region.
Well, I've not seen it gone down to the voting region. I've seen municipality, streets, but not voting.
okay. I have another question. There's 10 voting areas now, but again, if I understood you correct, could you combine to make 3 large ones,
Yes.
Sure.
and then have 3 people from each?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is a
3,
possibility.
6, or 9.
Okay, so we had that popular. And again, the only
As
thing
long as you're able to divide that out.
by population, I understand that. My only concern is that, again, and speaking from being on the board 10 years, each municipality, nothing against any one of the 3. Sometimes they have different wishes when on the school board based on sitting with different members from different places. My only concern is having 9 people from one area. I don't think that's fair.
Well, I think why don't we read what Brian wrote
Okay.
in his thing for the record, because I think that's important. An at-large election plan would constitute the most drastic change to the current election plan and could result in Union, Birdsboro losing direct representation on the board by their residents to Amity, which has the disproportionately largest share of the population. And then at the end, you actually summarize that with a case.
But
Where they
Well,
take
look,
that
it's an
into
important point.
consideration.
But that could still happen, though, very easily. If we have to have 3 regions that have a X population, you could very easily still drown out.
No, but
Amity.
if you have direct representation from each, and then you do an at-large plan based on the different,
If you do an
you do a combination, then each municipality has the ability to at least have some representation on the board.
Correct. I agree with you.
If you take just raw numbers, say 12, 5, and 3, just to make the math easier
Correct.
for us simple.
21,000.
That's 21,000 people, right?
Correct.
But you take 21,000 people, you divide it, that's 7,000 people. You go back out and say each one of the 3 regions has to have 7,000 people. You're only going to gain 2 in Birdsboro. You're going to double your size by picking up Amity people. That still potentially gives Union a disadvantage. Because
Well, look,
you're bringing 35
Any at-large,
30
any at-large situation is going to put less populated areas of the district
disadvantage.
at a
Correct.
disadvantage.
Correct.
And so, my personal opinion is to the degree that you can blunt that by having a representation from all 3 districts and then some portion at large, then, allows at least everybody to have a voice, because it's not like all 3 municipalities have the same personality.
Exactly.
If
That's
it
my
was
point.
that the case, I don't think it was as big an issue, but you have
Correct.
3 completely different demographics
Correct.
that
And I
you're
agree.
dealing with. You have
Well, you're still not guaranteeing that Union's going to get representation if you go with 3.
Yeah, but there's
you
this
can do a
chance.
combination plan.
Well,
there's
the
a chance.
combination plan is say this.
But your
say this 3
regions still have to be as nearly as equal.
So again, as I just said, if you go into the 3 regions, you're going to bring 3,500 people into the 3,000 that you're getting from Union, and you still could potentially not get a Union representative on the board.
That is true, but at least it's there. If you go at large,
But you have
could
to reside in the region in which you're being elected from. So, the
Correct.
difference would be you couldn't get 9 people who live in Amity 1
I got
running
that.
for,
I got that.
okay?
But-
somebody from Union Township, somebody from Birdsboro has an
Correct.
opportunity to run for a seat.
See, my concern is you get 9 people on the same street. They're all in one area, which I believe right now Wilson is having a problem with that because they all basically are from one area of Wilson District,
Yeah,
and
one
they're
neighborhood.
actually fighting close to
Now,
the schools.
Brian, could we not go with a a 3-region, 3 from each region, 3 from each municipality, and then say 6 at large?
But then you're only
You
gaining
mean one from each
one from each,
municipality?
and then
One
6 on
one from each
But
municipality.
it can't be, but no, because you still have, the regions still
Okay.
have to be as nearly as equal.
I'm just trying to find a way to at least guarantee that.
Now,
each
the other
region
thing you
has a
could do is
voice.
you could district into smaller
Yeah,
districts.
9 districts, that
The
was
9
all.
smaller districts, okay? And there, each board member has to reside in their district.
Which at that point there would guarantee at least
Correct.
one.
It would guarantee at
Or
least
not-
one
yeah,
from
correct.
each,
Yeah.
But now I have a question.
but you'd still have predominantly more people from the Amity district than
Well, you'd
Okay.
get even more,
districts.
you'd get even more out of that, because if you're gonna go,
Yeah,
again,
you'd probably have
100
7 or
by 9, 2,000, you could
You're talking about
potentially
20.
get 6
How will
of
this
them.
how will this mess up the Board of Elections in that?
Well,
You
you'd
know,
probably
Bird-
end up with
because, no, wait, I'm
2
sorry.
or 3 from Birdsboro, 2 from Union, and then the balance 4
Five
from.
or, no, a little more than that, you got 1,200 people at 2,100.
Well, you have about 2. You can divide 21,000 by 9. You're going to get
2,300.
2,300
Right.
people.
And we
So-
got, well, you're looking at potentially 5 out of.
You're still looking at 5 from Amity. My other question is the Board of Elections. How does this affect? Because when you're, if you do combine them and you separate more districts, does the Board of
Doesn't
Elections have
do
any problem with
anything.
that? They don't have.
They're still using their same precincts.
Okay.
We notify them, we get a court approved, we notify them, and
Okay.
they just report
Okay,
back.
so there's no major thing on
No,
that.
it's
But then
not.
again, we'd have to come up with that every 10 years, possibly looking at the census and redoing it.
Right.
But again, looking at these maps, I don't know where you're going to be able to get a 2,100 populated precinct without changing some lines, which you said we can't do. Because if you go over at least where I live, or even where Connor lives, or any of these others, I mean, you draw that line, there's more than 2,100 bodies living in that voting precinct.
It's a pickle, man.
Yeah. I mean, how many precincts do we have in Amity Township?
You have
right
6.
now? 6.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, how are those originally drawn up? Were those drawn up by population? Or are they drawn up by Democrat, Republican, registered voters type?
Whoever was in power at the time.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
And why do they have so many? When you figure they're only the double the
Because if you look at the
double
way
roughly
Amity's
a person.
carved up,
Began to make it equal, Kevin.
the way
It
they've
was a farming
gerrymandered
community.
Okay.
the boundaries here in Amity, I mean, like, at least in Union Township and Birdsboro, it makes sense. Union Township, they basically cut it between on 345.
Correct.
Birdsboro,
Right down the
they
middle
went
of town.
down right down the middle of town. I think on
They
82.
They
In
changed
Amity,
these.
it's. I mean, look at the way 4 and 5 piece together, and 3 for crying out loud. Those things, I mean, that's completely
Andrew,
gerrymandered.
if you remember,
Some-
they changed these when Bush was running for election, and I remember voting at the fire station until like 11 o'clock at night. The next election, they had changed where we voted to the church on 662.
No, I get it.
So I think
I'm
it-
just trying to wonder.
So it's not
I'm
gonna
wondering
change
is it,
again now,
if
is it?
it's by population, if they have any population requirements in terms of the precincts,
I don't know that they do.
or is it just particularly, it's all politics, registered voters, and
Because they
who's
created
where and-
they created new voting districts probably not more than 10 years ago.
Yeah, but my recollection was with the whole gerrymandering thing, the populations have to. I thought the populations had to stay the same, but you could, for example, you just have to change them in such a way that. Well, the way politicians would do it, they would change it in such a way to grab more, let's say, Republican voters, the way they skewed it out, than there are
Right.
Democrats, so there's a
In a
majority
particular area, right.
in every precinct, or vice versa. So it'd be interesting to know what that constraint was, because they would obviously have to know then what the populations were.
I mean,
of the
my line
areas
is
that
we
they're
need to do something, because if we don't,
Well, can we?
remember the public come up with something, we're going to.
So how do we?
There is a fourth option, we don't do anything.
Yeah, but then we're going to let somebody else pick our fate.
That's the other. That's the
There are,
other end.
and I don't think that's fair to us.
It's not fair to the district.
It's not fair to the district. I mean, I understand. I think we all want to, and we're all three from a different area. All three of us sitting on this committee, we all want to somewhat protect our own territory. But I think it'd be fair. But again, if we let the fourth option go, I'm afraid it's not going to be quite fair for everybody based on population alone. So we come up with an equitable for everybody.
But I mean,
It's not as simple
I
as a
don't think
solution.
we can go with. If you go with 3, there's an inequity to potential union.
Well, there's always going to be an inequity to the
right.
least populated.
Right.
Correct.
If you go
District.
with 9, then you're going to have a problem dividing these things up, because I'm looking at Amity 3. That's where I can tell you Amity 3 has more than 2,100 people living in it. That's why it's so small. It's just a very dense.
Well, okay, I have another question.
populated
What if we don't get the population from each district? What if
Yeah,
that
but
is?
then you're working within that variance of whatever.
That's what I mean. What if there is no? What if the U.S. Census doesn't bring it down?
Clearly,
25% or 30% or whatever.
Yeah. What is that? Quote reasonable
well, it's
discrepancy.
It's more based on case law.
Fast rule. Generally, the United States Supreme Court has said 10%, but there's been court cases where districts with 25% differentiation has been upheld.
I mean, wouldn't a court look at that and say, well, look, if you're going to follow both constraints, one is going to have to override the other eventually, because you're not going to get 100% parity.
Correct, and that's
So
why
wouldn't they default to the election precinct boundaries and say, okay, well, some are going to be a little bit more populated than others, and that's just you just have to do the best you can?
Yes. Now the question is if the best you can do is still so far off that it would require.
Then you're talking about redistricting the precincts.
No, it would be an at-large. I mean,
It would force it to be an at-large.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. That's a possibility. If it's so far off. Now, if 9 regions doesn't work, maybe 6 would work. I mean, you have the option of going with 6.
And Brian,
But no, wait, how do you do that then? You got one for me?
Oh, wait a minute.
You can't do 6.
Oh, you know what? That's what you'd have to have part at large.
You know,
You'd have to have.
could you do 3 at large then?
You'd have.
Could you do 6 per 6?
You'd have
6
3
area?
at large and then 2-2-2.
Could you do that? Then
You can do that.
again, I think that would probably be minimize the chance. At least, let's face it, we're all talking about Birdsboro and Union. At least keeping at least 2 representatives on here, possibly getting 3, possibly getting whatever. So, do we look at doing something along those lines where you do 2 and 3 at large?
Well, this is my personal opinion. I think whatever our goal should be, it should be to make sure that whatever plan goes in place provides for the most equal representation as possible amongst the 3 different municipalities, just because of the different personalities of each municipality. So to whatever extent, whatever plan comes forward, whether that's 9 districts at large or it's 3, and with 6 at large or whatever the case may be, so that you do have, what I would hate to see happen is that in an at-large situation that one particular neighborhood or area could dominate a board.
Correct.
With a particular issue. Because look, at the end of the day, how many people actually go out and vote?
we have that statistic.
And we know that.
Okay, and it's not that many people out of the entire population.
No, and it's not. It's not. And of course,
Let me add
if
them
you
up.
add up,
Probably about 6,000 people.
And if you add up both Birdsboro and Union together, less people voted both there combined than they did in Amity. So if you're doing all 100% at large, chances are you would have 9 people from one district. Which I agree with you, Andrew. I think
right off the top of my head.
Well, just give me the numbers.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You're probably talking about
Half, less than half.
9,000 people altogether voted.
correct. And like I said, if you look at Union and Birdsboro combined, I don't think we add up to
Oh, you
Amity.
forgot Union Township.
Well, you'd be surprised. Yeah, I mean,
500.
That's registered voters. That doesn't tell you how many people voted.
Oh.
But you're only talking about half the population is registered.
No.
And then you're probably talking about a third of that actually goes out and votes.
Yeah.
Correct.
So under that premise, what I'm saying though is if you had a whole bunch of motivated people, whether even in Birdsboro,
Correct.
you got 1,000 people together go vote, you could literally put a whole bunch of people from Birdsboro on the board.
Correct. Or the other thing is, all those people vote, and you still have, you can still have how many people where there's 12,000 people vote, or 12,000 people living there, and they get 5,000 people vote. Those, you still have the full 9
I look at the
for
last
them.
election before we came here, just as a simple example. I mean, St. Paul's Church on 662 had more people show up to vote there than everybody showed
Combined.
up in Union Township.
Correct.
But one precinct, and so we're
Absolutely.
trying to be fair. I mean, I understand. I mean, I don't want to come up with it, but at the same time, we gotta. I don't want to sit down every 10 years and have to redistrict.
But again, maybe we
Well,
don't.
we may have to, though.
Or we might not, based on population. If it doesn't, again, if we don't see a huge increase in population in 10 years, if we're into that reasonable disparity or
Well,
whatever.
quite frankly, I mean, you could see a difference in population because in Union Township, you have the Heritage Development off of Black Mat Road and Union Road, which is 110 homes. And you have another development that WB Homes is working on next to Blackwood Estates, which is another, I'm forgetting how many townhouses and single-family homes. So, all of a sudden, you could be talking about another 1,000 people easily popping into a municipality. And 10 years is a long time.
Correct.
I mean, you look
And here's
at
the other
10
thing.
years ago.
Here's the other thing is though,
It's a
that, and
long
you're right. So you have growth in Amity, you got growth in one thing. Birdsboro, they're landlocked.
Yeah, I mean,
You're never going to
that's
get
the
more
problem.
than you got now. Population-wise, we're at our limit.
Amity increase, you're going to see Union increase.
You're not going to see that. So again, we look at that.
Well, Union's not going to increase that much. Half of Union Township is the park.
Yeah, the racetrack, yeah.
Well, not that park.
Yeah, French Creek, yeah.
French Creek
Then you got
State
the
Park.
racetrack, too.
But no, the other area, like I said, that when we're not going to increase Birdsboro at all.
No.
Unless you start having, you might come pick up a few more 100 people, but basically there will be no development at all. So again, we had somewhat
But
fair.
basically, we can't go anywhere until we know
Again.
what the actual feet on the ground in
Population.
each one of these precincts are
Right.
before we can talk.
That's
So-
critical information that we need.
So can you work on that, Dr. Hanna?
I can work on it. I don't know how accurate that's going to be. I've never done population
Can you
counting.
talk to our
Census.
No,
Census
it
data.
should be somewhere like our representative should have that information. I'm sure they're the ones that have all the information when it comes to elections, right? They should have that.
Somebody.
I will. I'll give it to you. It's on an online website. You hover your mouse over it. It'll show you which precinct. It'll show you the total number of bodies in that precinct. It'll show you their age. It'll show
Send
you
us the
it's a
link.
great website. I even have some information.
Send
here.
us the link.
Where do you get
I
that?
will. Yeah, it's a bit tough to use.
Is it 2010,
It
22?
is. It's 2010.
It's
I don't
census
know.
data or voter
Census-
registration?
It's census data. It has it by precinct, the total number of people in each precinct.
Okay, that's great.
It's very helpful.
Well, why don't you just go through it right now? How many are in Amity 1?
Let me open it up here. Amity 1.
And we'll have to verify that information, but
What's the website you're on?
that's a whole
It's
nother.
called Dave's Redistricting.
Dave, read this.
And they use this.
I think we really should, but go
No,
ahead.
they use this to redistrict Congress. It
No, that's
sounds-
fine. Okay, I hear you, but okay.
Let me.
Amity 1.
I'm opening up. I actually drew my own maps.
Okay, Amity 1.
And I'm waiting for it to load because the app, the website, not the website, the browser crashed because it's very data intensive. I'm opening it up again, but it has to load. It loads the entire state of Pennsylvania, every precinct, every county,
I need to have the
every
data somewhere.
everything.
Yeah, I
So it's a
couldn't
very
find it.
data intensive website, but this is what I do for fun.
You need to get a life, Connor.
I know. But I'm waiting for it to load up again because I'm trying to open two at once. But I'm going, when it opens up, I'll go up during public comment and I'll tell you. Or I can just tell you now if you.
But you may want to tell us that we're not sure we're going to get to a public comment after we're running because we have the.
Well, there's really not much left to talk about.
Yeah, there isn't
Until
until we have the information.
Yeah.
Except to open it to the public.
Well, okay, why Connor's getting that up.
Wait.
What would well, he's trying to get a. What would happen if now that we were out working this, a member of the public was to go in front of or submit their plan now?
They would, for the taxpayers to submit their own plan, they would need a petition by 25% of the highest vote count for any board member in the last election. I did mention that to Dr. Otto. You said the highest vote counter was 2,000 in the last election, so you need a petition by 500.
So if they were to collect 500, they could submit their plan.
They could submit their plan, and that plan also would have to be
We could
comply
challenge
with
that in
these
court.
requirements. These would have to comply
They
with.
They're
could
gonna
just
do
go,
the
we want to
same-
do a plan
so-
at field, 9
so
of
in other
March,
words, no-
submit the plan, and
Well,
So in other words, they can submit their plan, but we have a right.
We'd have to get in there and
that's why, I mean,
Well, that's
But
why.
I really would want to approve.
Well, that's why I'm
You
saying.
could turn around though with another plan
That's what you have to
and
do.
challenge.
Correct.
You'd submit your plan. You would contest it in court, and you'd submit your own plan as another consideration.
Well, that's
for
why
a
we're
judge.
having this meeting, because I
Right.
think, we're trying to avoid that. And like I said, and still be fair to everybody. You figure that out yet, Connor?
No, my entire computer.
Just give it a holler when you get that.
What's it called again? Dave's
Dave's
Redistricting
app. If you look it up on Google.
app or app?
APP. It's an applet. It's a Microsoft Silverlight applet, and it's it's really remarkable. Actually.
Where's Frank when you need him?
I will send a link out to it. It takes it's difficult to maneuver if you're not familiar with it. It takes a little bit of playing around
it
with it. but when you
requires
zoom in
Silverlight
on it,
4.0.
You will. Are you on it, Mr. Shaheen?
I'm on it, but
Let me come over there and show you quick. If you load up the Pennsylvania data, I made the mistake of trying to open two maps I saved. All right.
like stating.
You want to take some public comment a while?
Yeah, was it?
Anybody from the public have any comments, questions a while? Sure.
How did this come up?
2010 voting.
How did it come up?
This whole reorganization, I mean,
Well, I mean, my understanding is there were some people out in the public that were already beating the bushes on this issue. And word got to the board, and we didn't realize that there was an issue with it.
Actually,
so.
somebody had contacted a state office, and they came back down to Brian from the state level.
Correct.
I guess a taxpayer had contacted the Pennsylvania State School Boards Association, asked them some questions about it, and they contacted me just to let me know that it was an issue. I advised the board that it was an issue.
okay.
So we're trying to avoid a major issue right now. That's what I mean. Yes. Anybody else?
Rich Martinez, 25 West Welsh. I just have a question. You were talking about combining precincts. If you combine a precinct from Amity with Birdsboro or Union Township,
Yes.
where would the person have to live to be able to run for the school board?
In one of those two
in
areas.
whatever the region is that we've now
The
combined.
new combined
Correct.
area?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So if you live in Amity, say on Daniel Boone Road, and it now combines with Birdsboro, if you live in that Daniel Boone Road, you know,
The new configuration.
the new configuration, yes, then you have to vote
You could be voting for somebody from Amity or from
from
Birdsboro.
Birdsboro. You could be voting for three people, I mean, two people from Birdsboro that you don't even know. If you don't, I mean, if there are only two people from Birdsboro ran.
Right
But
now,
you're in
there's
the-
6 Amity election districts, if you want to call it precincts. We all could live in Amity 3. Okay, there's nothing saying that you have to live in
Right.
an individual one
Correct.
to be able to run.
And I just wanted to comment, this issue actually came to light several years ago, about the time that Walt ran his first write-in campaign. It was discussed then, briefly, and disappeared. So somehow it must have resurfaced.
Correct. Familiar face.
Yes. Alan Ross from Lanco Road in Amity Township. Just as my two thoughts about this, I think that in putting together a redistricting plan, if you create a plan where there's 9 separate districts, I think it would be very difficult for the public to understand who can run for office in terms of where they live and where you're allowed to run. I think that could be very confusing. I think the existing plan where you're either from Union, Birdsboro, or Amity is understandable for the public. And I wonder if you wouldn't be better off leaving that concept in place so that people know who can run from a particular area and what they're running for. One of the alternatives might be keeping the 3 districts as you have it, but changing the representation for each of those 3 districts so it more closely fits the population.
You can't do that.
That's
It's not permissible, no. I mean, and each region has to have the same number of directors, and each region has to be as nearly equal in population as practical when considering election precincts. And no, your idea, yeah, I mean, it has a certain appeal, but it's
In other words, we
subject to challenge, and if challenged, it would not be upheld.
Well, if that's the case, if you can't keep it in that sense, I would highly encourage you to move towards one where there's at least some representation from each of the districts, such as 2 from Amity, 2 from Birdsboro, and 2 from Union, and then 3 at large, because I think that would be the fairest way that all the districts would actually have some representation on the board.
Now, I have a question. I'm sorry. Sorry, Mr. Ross. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off. I have a question for Mr. So if we do, say we...
That doesn't work. That would not work.
The only way it would work is if you can
Gerrymander your districts.
if each existing election precinct had the requisite number of population. It may work in Birdsboro because there's 5,000 people in Birdsboro, and it's split right down the middle. You may find 2,500 in each, and so it may work there. It won't. I don't know if it'll work in Union. You got 2 big blocks of ground, and there's only 3,500 people or 3,000 people in Union Township to begin with. So you're going to get at least one, and maybe you're going to have to combine the other one with somebody, another precinct in Amity Township to get the second. And then I think, unfortunately, the way the Union's set up, to be honest with you, the district to the south is all parkland. So you're going to have probably even the fewest number of people
Okay, I've got
in there.
numbers here.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, Mr. Ross, do you have any other?
Okay.
So if those two things aren't acceptable, then maybe we need to go to the, not at large. I mean,
Well-
whatever process you go to, it should be easily understandable. It's hard enough to get people to run for school district as it is now, trying to get people, if they don't understand what the seat is that they're actually running for, I don't know how you go with like to do that.
Okay, thank you. We'll take public comments. Go ahead, Mr. Sheen.
Okay, Amity 2,
Yeah,
2141.
okay.
Amity 6,
Yeah.
2287. Amity 1, 1339. Amity 4, 2867.
Wow.
Amity 3, 2080. Amity 5, 1869.
Well, they're pretty uniform.
Well, we are pretty uniform except for one. When I get to it, you'll see where it sticks out like a sore thumb. Union 1, 2620. Union 2 with a thriving metropolis of 883.
Yeah, that's basically Geiger Town.
Yeah.
What was that, 800 and what?
83. Birdsboro 2 at 2998. And Birdsboro 1 at 2165. So if you use that 10% number, you're pretty well close for everything except for
Union 2.
Union 2.
What was Amity 1?
Amity 1 was 1339.
1339.
You're close on that one, too.
And Amity 5 is 1869. We're screwed. I mean, just because if these things
That's
have
one
to
take, by the way.
you got to meet this issue
Is
of
that your
continuous
professional opinion?
boundaries and with the precincts. The problem is Union 2 is really going to screw everything up because you only have 800
And that's a fun
people
story.
living down there, and it's not contiguous to anything but Union 1.
So you leave Union 1 and 2 together.
And then they join up with something
They
else.
join up with some Amity.
Oh, wait a minute. Union 2 links up with Birdsboro.
Yeah, you could Birdsboro 1.
You can lump
okay.
Union 2 into Birdsboro, one of the Birdsboro ones.
You could actually do Birdsboro 1 and Union 2.
And see,
Yeah.
if Union, yeah,
But the problem is, well, then you'd have to have Birdsboro 2 is out on its own.
Then you can't, yeah, and that's not enough.
Oh, no, wait.
Well,
no.
it is. It's 2998.
Yeah.
It brings the
That's
percentage
if you do
down.
if you do 9
If
at
you do
2300
The percentage down.
If you did 9 districts,
districts, correct. But if you do
Yeah, if you do
3, then
9
it won't work.
But then you got Amity 1 as being significantly less.
Correct.
well, you have to pair Amity 1 up with something, maybe. I don't know. Maybe Amity 1 would slip in with Union 1. No, it's too
You're not
large.
contiguous there.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, Union 1, you're right, yeah.
Well, we got the pieces. I guess we have to, A, verify the data that that's correct.
Spread off the census, it gives you the census number and everything.
Correct. Good.
Correct.
It also gives you the number of people that voted in the 2008 election, too. Which is interesting, because if you look at Union 1, the population of 18 and over, 2,100 people, only a third of them voted.
Yeah, that's a U.S. That's a general number.
It's a general election.
You can take that all the way across the United States. You can find about 30% vote, the registered voters.
Oh, we got another person in the public. Yes, Mr. Kurtz.
All right, Connor Kurtz, 109 Ridge Drive. Check out that website. It's great. I actually drew up a map, which if we're going to stick with 3 regions, I'd like to share it with the committee. I didn't forward this to anybody yet. But what it does, I try to preserve Union Township. You have to take them into Amity Township to get the number, to get equal numbers. I have the populations on the side. This is just an idea I came up with a few days ago. Preserve Union Township by putting into Amity.
That's basically, it's got to follow the district, but I don't know how you get, well, that basically what you're doing is you're going into 3 separate regions.
Birdsboro, wait.
And you keep it by precinct, and those are
But
your
the
populations
issue still
on the side.
runs
You would
with
combine
those
all of Birdsboro with
4,000
Amity
people.
1, and they connect, and you have a population of 6,500.
people.
You connect Amity 3, Amity 4, and Amity 6, that would be a region. You get a population of 7,200. And you take all of Union Township, and you connect it with Amity 2 and Amity 5, and you get a population of 7,513. Those are very similar. And
Doesn't pass your
it seems to be
10%
the,
rule.
just
Well,
playing around with it, it seems to be the best.
They'll give you
I
some
think the
leeway.
other issue that you run into is if you're a Union Township representative or citizen, then your there's 4,000 people in Amity Township voting as part of your district,
Correct.
where you're only 3,100,
Correct.
3,000.
Correct.
And I'm not saying that people in Amity wouldn't vote for somebody coming from Union
Correct.
Township. Maybe they would, I'm sure people would. But that's one way to slice it.
Correct. And the other,
another way to slice it may be in going in 9 separate districts that,
correct.
And
again, Andrew, I'm sorry, number one would be the same. There's Birdsboro would have 5,000 of the 6,500.
Right, and Amity, people in Amity only have
people in Amity
1,300.
1 would only have 1,500
Right.
people. So again, I'm just pointing it out.
Again,
So
if we didn't
either way.
have Union 2, it seemed like we'd be in pretty good shape.
I think Union 2, it's going to have to pair up with.
Well, let me ask,
It's gonna have to pair up with Birdsboro.
Caller, and Mr. Sewers, you said they have to be contiguous, right? They have to touch.
That's what contiguous means.
That's what it means.
I'm not an English.
That's what it means.
That's what contiguous means.
I'm just saying, I'm just busting.
Not,
I
you
didn't
know, not
recognize.
every precinct has to touch. I mean,
The
At least
region,
part of
In New York, though, right?
everything within the region
Yeah,
has to touch.
No,
You can't say Union 2 and Amity 3.
Union 2, and I was looking at Union 2 and Amity 1.
No, you couldn't do that.
Okay, and that gets you where we want to be number-wise.
Right,
obviously,
that's-
too.
But see, Andrew, you are right. I mean, again, going back to one of my original comments and your original comments, there are 3 different municipalities, and under, excuse me, Mr. Kurtz's plan, not that the population isn't right, but again, having somebody from Amity, who there's going to be roughly 4,000 vote for a person from Union, the mindset is somewhat different. Same way Birdsboro and his scenario of number 1 is a disadvantage, in my opinion, of the Amity 1 precinct.
It would be very, I didn't quite finish up. If you cannot maintain it the way it is and have the population all the same, you have to take it into Amity unless you combine all of Birdsboro with all of Union Township. That would be the only other option, and then split up Amity. If that would mean Amity gets 6 representatives and Union and Birdsboro get 3, and that would combine them. That would be the only way you could get the population equal.
Well, I think we're going to have to really think about this because
But I do encourage you to check out that website. It's phenomenal. You can actually redistrict Congress for fun, and it goes on websites. It's pastime. Thank you very much for allowing me to comment.
Thank you.
I'll take a seat.
okay.
We need to talk to you about what you do in your spare time.
All right. So anyway, is there anyone else in the public have any comments? Because what we're going to do is we'll probably take a few minute break before we start our voting meeting. But at board and committee minutes, any other thing we need from Dr. Otto or Brian, or I think we're going to have another meeting. We're going to have to go back, think about this, all 3 of us, and again maybe try to come up with some game plan to present to the board.
Yeah.
Any idea, Brian, on time frame?
You could present several plans. to the
I'm
board.
sorry, you're right, Andrew. Any time frame that you think we should try to get this thing done? I mean, do you have any gut feeling of?
no, I don't have any
we-
sense of what's going on out.
Okay,
outside
but we can't
here.
let it. We obviously cannot let it sit.
No, you don't want it to let.
Okay.
To sit. You
So,
want to be preempted on this issue. I don't believe.
So-
I'd rather go in with a plan versus trying to defend the plan once somebody else has submitted theirs.
So I have a question. Do we want to think about it in the next
Yeah.
voting meeting in March, which will be like the 26th or 24th?
Come in just prior to that.
Just prior again, 6:30 again, and maybe kick around more ideas. Go back, talk to people. And
26, Kevin.
Is it? Thank you. March 26th. Talk to people and get some of their ideas. Some of them maybe will come over the day that none of us have thought about.
Yeah.
All right, but at least it's out there. Anyone else? Let's take 15 minutes then, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thoughts together.